everyone, the big event is finally here. President Trump saying Namaste India with his first ever state visit to the country. Now, here's what you can expect from this state visit and what it could mean for US-India bilateral relations. First up will be Ahmedabad, Gujarat, Prime Minister Modi's home state. Trump will make his way to Sabarmati Ashram, the home of Mahatma Gandhi, the father of the nation. Next, he will head to Motera Stadium to inaugurate the world's largest cricket facility. On 25th of February, it will be all business and high-profile meetings for Trump in the country's capital. That will be followed by a reception for prominent business delegates. Now, why is this trip so important? Well, for one, for President Trump, it is not only seeking another trade win post the China Phase 1, it is also about getting closer to India and Indians. The Indian diaspora could be on Trump's domestic agenda ahead of the 2020 elections. Also, another important angle behind this trip could be enhanced military cooperation with India to counterbalance China's rising influence in Asia. For Modi too, mind you, this trip could do the groundwork for finalizing a win-win trade deal for both nations, if not now, then sometime down the line. Plus, Modi's growing friendship with Trump could work well for him as a global leader. Not to forget, India is also keen to invest in military hardware to bridge the gap with China, especially in and around the Indian Ocean. However, there are a few sticking points to watch out for when the two leaders eventually meet. Number one is India's removal from the developing nations list that is seen as a setback for trade concessions from the US. Plus, there are issues the US has with the new data privacy law in India, and of course, the higher tax levies on e-commerce giants like Amazon has been a bone of contention for a while now. So lots to really watch out for in that high-profile meet. Nancy.
Yes, and thankfully you'll be there on the ground for all the excitement around it. Well, for more, let's bring in Meera Shankar to the conversation. She's a former Indian ambassador to the U.S., and I'm delighted to say joins us now from New Delhi. Ambassador, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. Well, we were just discussing how the favorability rankings, as measured by Pew Research, of U.S. President Donald Trump in India have really been rising when it comes to this question of, do you have confidence in President Trump to do the right thing, from about 16% when he was elected all the way up to 56% now. What do you think is behind that rise in popularity?
I think that there is an increasing strategic convergence between India and the United States in the Asia-Pacific region. And I think that this is a reflection of that. A lot of Indians approve of the way President Trump has tried to balance China in Asia. A lot of Indians approve of the fact that he has put more pressure on Pakistan with regard to terrorism than previous administrations. So there is this sense that he has, his policies have been more convergent with India. At the same time, there is friction on the trade front. So you have a very robust strategic relationship. The trade and economic relationship is growing, in the sense that you'll see an increase in that. But at the same time, there are issues on the table for both countries which they have to work through.
Yes, primary among which is getting a trade deal done, Ambassador. On that front, I think the fact that both nations have adopted protectionist policies towards, some of their key industries would be a key impediment?
Yes, I think, President Trump's America First policy and Prime Minister Modi's Make in India policy, I think, make a trade deal more difficult, but I don't see it as insurmountable. I think given patience and time, both countries have the desire to resolve their differences in a way which is mutually beneficial.
I agree with you on that front. I think there is reason for both countries to find common ground and for both leaders to find common ground. But the problem for India is that the U.S. wants to make inroads in certain sectors which are so sensitive for the industry back home, whether it's a dairy industry which employs nearly 80 million people, that's right, 80 million people in India, or whether it's really the retail sector that, essentially tries to protect the local mom and pop stores, the Kirana stores as they're called, to essentially safeguard the interest of the local trader.
Yes, and it was interesting when I was in America, I found that you couldn't find a Walmart store in Maine, New York, because the retailers in New York, the small retailers, had basically decided, and the administration had decided, that it would hit them. So, it's not something which is unique to India. I've seen this in Italy too, where a large portion of the economy is in the hands of small retail. And as you mentioned, for India, agriculture is not just a question of trade. It's a question of subsistence livelihood for so many small farmers who have holdings of 2 acres, 3 acres, and then, livestock like 2-3 cows instead of a minimum of 300, 400 cattle like the commercial dairy farmers would have. So there are issues given the different levels of development of the two countries. And here I think it's a bit disappointing that the U.S. has, eased out India from the status of a developing country, because our per capita GDP is just $2,000. Take China's, it's $10,000. So you're looking at comparing really grapes and apples or something like that.
And do you think there's enough disappointment around that move that perhaps that will make Prime Minister Modi less willing to budge on other areas that the U.S. cares about, especially in the way of the e-commerce taxes for big global e-commerce giants like Amazon, as you just stressed the importance of the smaller retailers?
Yes, I think that whatever package emerges, I think India would also expect to get increased market access and to address some of these issues like withdrawal of GSP, easing out from developing country status, movement of software personnel, which has become far more difficult due to executive orders with regard to processing and access for some of our agricultural products. So I think they're really looking at a package. The U.S. is looking at medical devices, agriculture, particularly dairy and dairy products, some fruits, data localization. So there are a number of small issues on the table which could be perhaps handled more easily, and then there are more complex issues which will take time to resolve, like data localization. So I think President, the good thing though is that both countries have tended to not, play this up as a confrontational issue. Even President Trump has remarkably, said that we'll have a trade deal. It may not be now. It may not even be before the presidential election in the U.S., but we'll have it. And from the Indian side, too, we're saying there can't be any kind of artificial timeline for a trade deal, but we'll get there. So the important thing is that both sides continue to remain engaged. They're not adopting a confrontational stance, and they're not making it a make or break issue for the relationship. Because the strategic aspects of the relationship are robust.
Sure, ma'am, but you raised an important point, which is about data localization that can impact the likes of Facebook as well as Google operating in India. And we've seen how technology has been a sticking point between the U.S. and China. It is an important point, and one that, while you believe is complicated, will they be able to find answers around it?
I think it's a larger question than just India and the U.S. I mean, even Europe, for instance, particularly Germany, has adopted data localization because there are questions of security of data, there are questions of privacy of citizens, there are a large number of questions, and these have to be balanced versus ease of operation. And I think there will be a larger negotiation on these issues at a global level.